OK, well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, will today use a speech to say that the UK must wean itself off migrant labour. It's an incredible thing for him to say.
Fascinating. Yeah, well, speaking at the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, he will say the days of low pay and cheap labour are over and the focus should now instead be on training workers who are already in the country.
Well, it follows comments from the head of the CBI, Tony Danker, urging the Prime Minister to harness migration to promote economic growth.
Well, joining us now is a former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Leon Emirali. Good morning to you. Let's start, shall we, with what seems to be an extraordinary hardening of his position from the Labour leader, almost more sort of Brexit position than the Conservatives at this point. And I suppose this is because he has every intention of trying to become Prime Minister at the next election. But you could have copy and pasted parts of what we're expecting him to say from a Boris Johnson speech, couldn't you?
Very much so. I think it's quite a shrewd game of politics here from Keir Starmer. I mean, he's spotted this opportunity that Rishi Sunak is not necessarily being painted as this true Brexiteer, even though he'll argue otherwise. And he thinks he can take that sort of battleground and soak up that Brexit vote. So I think it's very shrewd from Keir Starmer, but there's still question marks. Why are you saying it now? Where was this talk, 2-3 years ago? Why is it coming now? And it might be the public see through that and don't necessarily trust him on the issue.
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, look, it's the front page of the Daily Telegraph. This is the Tory crib sheet, the Tory graph as it's called. And Starmer is suddenly, the kind of voice of Brexit land. I think it's an astonishing turnaround. And I also think it shows you all of the infighting with the Conservatives creates this vacuum for Labour to move into. So the Tories have got to sort themselves out, haven't they, Leon?
They do. And, the Conservative Party have got a long track record of beating themselves up and dividing themselves over the issue of Europe. And, we thought that was put to bed when we left the European Union. But clearly those debates are still rumbling on. And I think that if the Conservatives don't consolidate around a position, then there could be a gap for Labour to slot into. And we know that Brexit's still going to be an important battleground in the next general election.
Yeah, and these divisions, they aren't just exclusive to the backbenchers, the ERG versus, sort of more centrist One Nation Conservatives. It's right there in the cabinet. I mean, we had Robert Jenrick on this programme yesterday saying he pretty much in alignment with what Sir Keir Starmer's saying, trying to get people who are on work benefits back into the workforce, appearing to contradict the Prime Minister, who spoke at the CBI later, saying, actually, we do need to try and encourage more migrants into the country, but with a visa-style scheme. Fascinating to see this right at the top of the cabinet.
Yeah, and I think that, message discipline is one of those things that advisers push on. We need to have the same message coming from different ministers. And if you haven't got that, you've got a government that doesn't look united and doesn't look like it's got a plan. And I think this sort of flip-flopping on the idea of Brexit isn't going to play down well in those communities that voted for it. And I think that Labour have spotted that and sensed a bit of danger.
Now, call me a grizzled cynic, but this feels like focus group politics. How genuine is this from Starmer? And how much is it instead a kind of Blairism, let's say what we need to say to get elected? And how would it land with the hardcore refugee welcome types within the Labour Party, do you think?
I think you're justified to be a grizzled cynic there, Martin, because it does look like that, doesn't it? I'm not sure this is a comfortable position for Keir Starmer. I mean, he hasn't been a sort of consistent true Brexiteer at all. So
he
to suddenly
led the
come
People's
with this
Vote campaign to cancel Brexit.
Indeed, and I think that's how he's being painted. And there is a bit of opportunism here, I think, and he's spotted an opportunity and gone for it. But it doesn't sound sincere. It doesn't sound genuine. And if he can't get voters to believe him, to truly believe him, then it could backfire spectacularly.
Look, yesterday we heard quite robustly from the Prime Minister trying to distance himself from these claims of a Swiss-style deal with the EU. And it seems like the Prime Minister is having to put out fires left, right and centre. That was sort of promoted, wasn't it, by the Chancellor in some of the interviews and the comments he made last week. Now we're having more problems being exposed with his Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab. Now the third allegation against him. This is being reported at the front of The Guardian today. Pippa Crerar, who arguably brought down the Prime Minister with her revelations into Partygate. Yep. So this is very, very embarrassing for the Prime Minister and, of course, difficult questions for Dominic Raab as he appears before the Justice Committee later today.
It is, and, it's a difficult one to prove. What's bullying and what's just being a hard taskmaster?
Throwing bits of tomato.
Well, if those stories are to be believed, then I think there's a lot of questions that need to be asked and action should be taken. But how do you prove that? It's just I said, he said, and you go back and forth on it. So it is damaging fine. But if you've got this low-level rumbling of this going on in the background, it detracts from what you want to be doing, you know, as a government implementing your plan for the country. So eventually, if this keeps going on, Rishi Sunak's going to have to put an end to it one way or another, and that looks tricky.
The fascinating thing is that nobody's talking about what Sunak is saying today. They're talking about Starmer. Starmer, I think, has stolen a march here. It's canny politics.
It is. And, you know, Rishi Sunak, one of the criticisms of him is that he's not got that sort of political antennae to lead the Conservative Party into the next election. And I think that's evident. He's the Prime Minister. He should be on the front page of the Telegraph the day after a big speech, not the leader of the opposition.
Leon, I want to ask you, in your capacity as a former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, what's your gut reaction when you see the front of the Daily Mail, again, a Conservative newspaper, talking about parties for MPs paid for by the taxpayer as we see taxes at the highest level since the Second World War and this cost of living crisis? I mean, it's going to go down really badly.
It leaves a sour taste in the mouth, doesn't it, Isabel? I think, you know, when we think about what a lot of families in this country are going through, looking at Christmas with a sense of dread because of how much it's going to cost, and here we are bailing out MPs on the taxpayer pound to enjoy parties and decorations.
Just explain how this... I know that this has all come from specifically the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, but presumably the Chancellor or the Prime Minister can say, no, this is not on at this point.
Well, the rules will be implemented, and it's up to the MPs as to whether or not they want to submit those expenses for parties. And it's the same with the way MPs get paid. That body, you know, says you get paid this much, and MPs sort of have to do it. So it is a strange situation.
There's one thing that's a saving grace. They won't be expensing for the booze, but they can for the cake. You know, cakeism. This is cakeism. They
let them eat cake.
Yeah.
Let the MPs eat cake.
And we're paying.
Exactly. It's not a laughing matter, really. Leon, Emirali, fascinating to talk to you so much politics around this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.